coordinator in the Yukon Center for mHealth and Social Media. And it's my great honor today to introduce our speaker, Professor Marie Shanahan. So she's an associate professor and head of the Department of Journalism at the University of Connecticut. Her academic research and teaching focus on the intersection of journalism and digital communication technology. So she studies trends in digital discourse, particularly online commenting on news sites and social media, misinformation, and news literacy. And she has, of course, worked as a news reporter, an online producer, and a digital editor for more than 20 years. Professor Shanahan was selected as a Fulbright, a US scholar in 2020. And of course that was delayed. So during the summer of 2022, she worked with the faculty and students in Tacloban, Leyte, Philippines, to study attitudes and pathways to news among college students. She also researched the challenges faced by provincial journalists, including the spread of misinformation. And today, Marie is going to present examples of how journalists and medical professionals have used social media to actively confront false health narratives and debunk them as well. And she's going to explain how news literacy, so knowledge of the standards of high quality, evidence-based journalism, can help people decide what online health information to trust, share, and act upon. So thank you all again for joining us, and I will now turn things over to Professor Shanahan.
Thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad to see so many people here. It signals two things to me. One is that misinformation is a serious problem, and that what's good is that a lot of people are concerned about it and really would like to do something about it. So for those of us working in the public information space, journalists like myself, public health officials, educators, doctors, we're facing this formidable battle against disinformation and misinformation that is being enabled and accelerated by the internet and social media, so computer mediated communication. And I'd like to start today by asking you all to think about your daily information diet. For most of us, these are like your daily information habits. And for me, I wake up in the morning, and the first thing that I do is I grab my mobile device, which is usually in bed with me. And that I think about the first information signals that I encounter on my phone tend to be notifications, that have come through during the night. So text messages or any notifications that I may have gotten from apps that I, subscribe to, like NPR, for example. So I get those signals, and then I follow that. I check my email, which gives me more information about work, about my family, maybe newsletters that I signed up for. And then from there, I open social media. And my social media apps of choice right now, I open Facebook, I open Twitter, I open Instagram, and I open LinkedIn. And all that probably takes me about an hour. And what I think about is, like, on social media, and if you guys, our habits are similar to mine in any way, because news and information are woven on there into this continuous feed, that I, like most online users, I'm often mixing my information and news consumption with other stuff like social connection and relationship building and problem solving and social action and entertainment. Like, it's all just coming through at the same time. And so the information that I'm getting can be very muddled within all of these other things. And based on what I'm seeing, because of stuff posted by my friends, my family, people I trust, influencers or organizations, things that I follow because I admire them, I might click on a link, right? Or I might do a direct Google search based on some topic that just piqued my interest. And I like to think that most of my clicks and my searches are made because I'm curious. But the truth is that I often seek out more information because something that I saw stirred up emotions inside me. Fear, delight, empathy, something amused me, I'm concerned about it, I'm excited, or I'm angry. And these feelings may even compel me to like something or comment on something or share it on my own social media accounts. So if you think about your daily information diet, if it's similar this way, like, Who is your list of sources? Is your sources your family and friends that you're following on social? What motivates you to click on or seek out information? And how are you even just being exposed to information where you may not realize? Like you're on Instagram just because you're bored, and in the meantime, you're getting information sort of delivered to you. And so really our information habits have changed because of social media. This is not at all what it was like when I, was a newspaper reporter and there was no internet really that people used. And so because we all have this unfettered and ubiquitous access to information, thanks to our mobile devices, this being able to search for information and connect to people on social media gives us a real sense of empowerment. And empowerment is very engaging. And to think about it in like health terms, it is self-efficacy. So I found a couple surveys that were just released last month from the Pew Research Center showing the popularity of social media use among Americans. So if there's some young people who are on this webinar today, you can see adults under 30 in particular, this was the outlier for this one, are now almost as likely to trust information on social media as they do from national news outlets. So that's surprising to me, obviously as a journalism professor, but shows this shift is happening, that social media really is having a big effect on people. The second one that I saw this month was that 25% of folks under 30 now regularly get their news from TikTok. And TikTok really sort of exploded in popularity during the pandemic. We're all sort of stuck at home and online. And TikTok was new. It was amusing. It has an amazing sort of algorithmic engine to show us new stuff. And so not even just if we just think about young people, but overall, the number of people who are regularly getting news from TikTok in the US has tripled from when the pandemic started in 2020 to now. It was 3%, now it's 10%. So if we think about that in terms of the information that we're getting, people are using the internet, they're using social media to find news, and they're using social media and internet searches to find and share information about health, which is the focus of this talk today. So there was another study that I found by the Pew Research Center that said back in August of 2021 that 4 out of 10 Americans said that social media was an important way for them to follow news about the COVID-19 vaccine. So people were turning to social media for that information. Now, if any of you use social media and that raises some red flags for you, well, it should. But that research shows that health consumers, which all of us are, news consumers, health information consumers, people of all social groups, all genders, all ages, we use social platforms now to look up medical information or to share it. And if we think about websites, I have all these icons on here, TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, that's Wikipedia, Instagram, Twitter, Google, that's Telegram, Reddit, and Quora, right? People use these sites to find out stuff, and they have basically become our de facto public square. It is, all of these sites are privately owned. They're not public, but they feel public. And they have become our digital plazas for meeting up with each other. They've become our libraries, and they've also become our medical encyclopedias, right? And so knowing this, many health professionals, just like journalists, are using these open social media platforms to disseminate health-related information, to increase people's health literacy, and also for that term that I used before, so that people can become, that self-efficacy, that they can, find information on their own and have good outcomes. But there's a big but inside there, because there's so many bad actors at work on these platforms as well, because they're open. And because there is so much information that's being passed through these platforms in real time, like just a flood of information. It's being mediated by algorithms and not actual people. And that any piece of information that's out there is far less likely to be challenged like it was in the old days. And so all of you know that your constant connection through social media means that you get constant, ongoing discovery, immediate, gratification when you're looking for information. Stuff is constantly being delivered to you. Stuff can be corrected, and you can also participate. but corrections don't break through as well as other things. And that all of us are no longer sort of waiting for, a journalist like me or an authority to tell them what's going on. Everyone is on demand and they can look up stuff as they like. And that we're searching for stuff when we want it, and we're sharing stuff to our own audiences. So that's very powerful for all of us. But the problem is that you have these bad actors who are in there as well. And so disinformation and misinformation, and I'll explain what those are in a second, is really driven by the ease of sharing in the digital age. The propagation of health misinformation through social media, it's a major public concern. You think about vaccination myths, vaccine hesitancy, miracle diets, alternative treatments based on people's anecdotes, misleading advertisements about health products. All of those things can cause serious problems. And so even though everyone can publish online, it's very easy. You can create content, you can distribute it. The dissemination of everything has been just supercharged because we all can participate. We're not just consumers, we're also creators. And that information sharing and this community activity essentially resides in every device that's connected to the network. So it's when you're at home, it's when you're at school, it's when you're at work, it's when you're on the go. You're always connected, you're always getting messages or sending messages. And you think about the receivers of the audience. So we think about the public. They're easier to manipulate than ever before because these bad actors know how to prey upon the things that will get attention, that will get our attention. And often it's just fear and outrage. So what's the difference between disinformation and misinformation? You hear those two terms. There's another term I'm going to mention too. And so this is with great respect to Claire Wardle and the research that she's done at First Draft News. Misinformation and disinformation are both incorrect information. However, the motivation for sharing the content are different. So disinformation is intentionally created to deceive people and manipulate. It is lies with no truth, and it's meant to cause confusion and lead you, the audience, to believe a lie. So disinformation has a close cousin called malinformation, and malinformation can be something that is actually based on fact, but then used maliciously and sort of out of context to mislead people. And, a good example of malinformation would be like surfacing an old story from 10 years ago and pretending it's happening right now, or finding a photo that happened a long time ago in another part of the world and posting it like it's actually happening right now here. So who are these people that are spreading disinformation and this malinformation? Well, you have propagandists and terrorists and deliberate manipulators, including some marketing people. You have partisan politics, you have partisan media, and you also have Russian and other state actors who are engaging in information warfare with our country. So to use a health metaphor, which is what's on the slide, disinformation is basically the germ that starts all the trouble. And you have bad actors who are creating these germs. What misinformation is the product of the disinformation and the malinformation. So if disinformation is the germ, then misinformation is the infection. So when you get tricked by an agent of disinformation and you share that content, it becomes misinformation. Now you've passed it on to your audience. Now you aren't necessarily the bad actor. You probably didn't realize you were being manipulated or deceived when you passed it along. Your intention may have been good, you were duped. But as we know, germs don't move by themselves. Germs depend on people and their habits and their environment and their interaction with other people. So the internet, and especially social media, is the viral part of the problem. So you think about something going viral, we say that about internet content all the time. If you compare it to a germ, this is what happens. The disinformation becomes misinformation and that is spread virally and becomes really hard to cure. And so misinformation often, it keeps replicating by going through hubs of people who have their own audiences, or even big influencers who have big targeted audiences. And, people who are disinformation agents, they want to get journalists to share their stuff because journalists in general and news organizations have a bigger audience. It can spread, misinformation can spread in large swaths by people with a lot of connections. It can spread because of algorithms. are making it come up, not realizing that it's bad information. And I think that misinformation can also linger in what's called, there's a theory called the long tail, which is, it's just shared by person to person, group to group, and it just stays out there and doesn't go away and keeps sort of coming up again. So if you think about your own interactions on social media, if you interact with some information, then you can become an agent of the distribution process. As a journalist, I love it when people read my story and then decide to share it, right? Like if I don't have an audience, then I don't have any effect. So, when I'm teaching my journalism students here at UConn, they want to reach an audience and they want that audience to then share their stories, and then their information can grow. The bad actors want to do the same thing. But what we may not realize is that because of the way social media is structured, the design of that system is that when we like or comment or share something on social, it's visible in a public way, often to our friends and family, or even just open public if that's how you have your account set up. So then it's visible, and then it gets amplified by an algorithm to your friends and family or other people who are sort of part of your community and similar to you. And these social performative forces, they create, produce, and spread messages. It's very powerful. So I was reading about, there's this advocacy group called the Integrity Institute, which is studying how social media sites are amplifying misinformation more than good information. And they found that Twitter in particular has the greatest misinformation amplification factor. And it's because it's so easy to just hit the button and retweet. TikTok, the Chinese-owned video site, which we're going to talk about some more today, is in second place. TikTok uses machine learning models to predict what is going to be engaging, and it makes recommendations to you. So that's their algorithm spreads a lot. And what was interesting is that during those 2 years of pandemic, TikTok had a lot of misinformation about COVID-19 on there that was just being replicated over and over again, partially because of the algorithm. And so this group, their study found that Facebook actually has the most instances of misinformation. And that may just because Facebook has so many users, more than any other platform. But amplifying the misinformation on Facebook actually happens to a lesser degree because sharing a post on Facebook takes more steps. TikTok, you don't even have to do anything. It does it for you. Twitter, you just hit the button, it retweets. But Facebook, you actually have to make a post and it takes a little longer. So the design can matter. And bad actors, the people who are causing the problems, they are smart and subversive, and they know how to take advantage of these design functions on these social platforms. And so, there has been pressure on the platforms to do something about that. They hold some responsibility. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what some of the things that have happened as that pressure has increased over the years. But I think it's important for us to differentiate between the bad actors who are steering the false information, the false narratives, and then the people who are unknowingly doing it, the people maybe like you and me. So why do bad actors create disinformation? You think about who are the people that are doing it? Well, they want to make money. They're looking for political gain. They want to cause confusion. They want to even produce training data for later future ongoing manipulation of the public. Like they're figuring things out. Disinformation purveyors include politicians, public officials, members of the media, unscrupulous ones, physicians, wellness hucksters. We see all that stuff. So that's their motivation. Why do ordinary citizens share misinformation? Why might you and I do it, not realizing? Usually it's fear. It's wanting to protect people that we care about. They say that the most successful problematic content plays on people's emotions, encouraging their feelings of either superiority, their anger, or their fear. People also share misinformation, obviously, probably not realizing, because they think they're helping and because they want to feel like they're part of a community. They connect with other people who are sharing similar information. Because that's something that social media also does. It can bring people with similar interests together very quickly. As humans, we have a desire for shared understanding, especially among people who share our social norms. And that often can outweigh a desire for the truth. We just want to be part of a group. And so social media contributes to this common online conversation that can be created in positive and in very negative ways. It goes both ways. It's like that double-edged sword. It can be used for good if you use it for good, or it can be used for evil. So if we understand the motivations of the public, of those sort of active bystanders who are seeing this stuff and who are being misled, who are sharing it, maybe that can help us combat this problem, which is why I talk about this. And I'll also point out that sloppy journalists, like lazy ones that don't check, they also spread misinformation too. They're not, they don't want to be disinformation agents, but because they're not, doing all the things that I'm teaching in class, sometimes, the sloppy journalism can spread the misinformation too. So these are the most common health misinformation topics that are found on social media, according to the study that I found from the NIH from January last year. It's about vaccines, diets, eating disorders. You see a lot of social, drugs and tobacco products, pandemics, which we've just gone through, communicable diseases, non-communicable diseases, like cancer, and then medical treatments and health interventions. And, just knowing that, and I found this old photo from the Library of Congress, this is a snake oil salesman. Like snake oil salesman, it's nothing new. Propagandists, conspiracy theorists, rumors, fabricated information, it's about health or anything else, it's been around for a long time. The issue is that these social media platforms, combined with, the political polarization that we've seen in our country and around the world, in the past 6 years, have really, it's moved over to health and science developments, especially during the pandemic, and it's made it easier for misinformation and disinformation to spread about health things. And I like this quote that I found that says, disinformation agents try to make a topic uncertain and debatable. It can be settled science, such as measles vaccines, but now suddenly it becomes debatable because you have social media, you have this communication platform meant for discourse. And that opens up the topic to all kinds of problems because you have the bad actors who are manipulating the conversations. And I'll have these are a bunch of games that I have here in my office about fake news, but it's not a game. And public health officials, as I've been thinking about this topic, they encounter the same problems as journalists, in that we're trying to communicate to a very distrusting public in an oversaturated information landscape. And when everybody's on the same platform, all of us are on the same platform, we're on the internet, that the media becomes a game of attention. And if you can get the attention, then you are winning. And so which is the reason you came here today, is you want to know what are some of the solutions to this problem? What can we do about it? And unfortunately, there are no simplistic solutions to this misinformation problem. I can teach news literacy and journalism as well as I can here at UConn, but that's not going to fix the problem. It's not just going to be the journalists. It has to be everybody. It's a multi-pronged approach that has to involve the social media platforms themselves, governments, educators, public health officials, journalists, members of, leaders of communities, and then individual citizens. There's so many things that need to come together in order to make this problem lessen, including just within ourselves. If we think about how a lot of us don't read or listen deeply anymore. I mean, I told you what my morning information diet is, and I have probably like 6 newspapers worth of information that comes at me by looking at my notifications, by looking at my email, and looking at my social media feeds. Like a ton of information comes at me all at once. So I'm not really diving deep into anything because, I have an hour and not enough time, but I want to sort of skim it all. And so we're not diving deep, and then we're not thinking deeply and realizing, critically thinking about stuff. And all of you who are here, who are in college or teach college students or want to teach the public, that deep critical thinking is vital, which is why I'm going to talk about news literacy. It's not just for kids, it's for everybody. So we need to find ways to get people and these platforms to signal in such a way so that we can be inoculated from the bad information before it infects us. All right. So we all, this is my main message for you today, that we all have a personal responsibility to fight the infodemic, and that we have to be courageous to actively confront false narratives, take more time when we are sharing information, that we don't just go to one source, that if you are using TikTok for all of your news, that's probably not a great idea. And if you are only reading, one particular news site, that's not a good idea either. You should diversify, just like your portfolio. And that you should demand evidence when you want something. If those of you who are in college, if your college professors are like, how did you come to this conclusion? What's the proof? That's what we're asking for. That's what you want from all the information that you're getting. And it's a necessity in our very muddy information climate that keeps getting muddier. We should be able to correct our own errors and keep the record straight when we see something that's not right. And there's ways to do that. It's hard to confront someone who is really dug in. Or, in my own case, I can tell you a story. Like during the height of the pandemic, I had a family Facebook group. I have a lot of relatives, they're older than me, my aunts and uncles, and they were, I had this one particular relative who kept sharing, cures for COVID, like to drink garlic juice. And I don't want to disrespect my uncle, but at the same time, I can't let that stand. So I have to figure out a way to talk to him and debunk that bad information, bad health information, because if we all just drink garlic juice, like it's not going to work. Like we need to go get vaccinated. So, you can see how, that problem of being able to talk to people about misinformation, it can cause a lot of stress. And when we think about it, this is a picture of a 7-headed hydra, that it feels like you're fighting that because you cut off one head. If you don't cauterize it, 3 more grow in its place. And that's how bad information is replicating on social media. And I'm a journalist, and debunking bad information is part of my job. But debunks, unfortunately, don't reach as many people as the misinformation itself. And studies have shown that. So if a debunk does actually get to you, or does get to a person who has gotten bad information, it's hard to erase, the wrong information from someone's brain. If that was the first thing that flashed onto their mind and imprinted it, it's going to be hard to take it away. Which is why it's important for journalists to not publish errors, but also, figure out ways, like debunks are still important, but maybe there's other tools that we can use. So I just want to quickly talk about some of the psychology that makes it difficult to change people's minds. When we are entrenched in our beliefs, even when it's based on false information, there's a lot of psychological forces working there, a lot of mental shortcuts that we do, even just because we're overwhelmed with information, right? So something has, if you're getting information from a particular source, like a reputation and the familiarity of a message, is very persuasive. It can be a persuasive factor of whether you pay attention to it and take it in. Whether other people find it credible. If everyone in your community is sharing this thing, even though it's not true, it's gotten endorsement from your people. Consistency. If you keep seeing the message over and over again, echoed by multiple sites, multiple places on the internet, then that's gonna make it seem like it's true. And then also, if it confirms your own beliefs, then you're more likely to believe it. And so you have things in human psychology like confirmation bias, and that's the tendency to search for, interpret, or favor, recall information in a way that confirms your prior beliefs. Motivated reasoning. How people convince themselves or remain convinced that what they want to believe by avoiding, ignoring, or devaluing any other information that contradicts them. There's a thing called backfire effect, which has been somewhat disproved, but I can tell you it means that when a correction is presented, evidence-based, that some people say, they just dig in and they say, nope, I'm not going to believe it. And, they just refute it completely. And then selective exposure, that's basically cherry picking your information, focusing on stuff that will, again, confirm what you believe and, leaving out everything else in order to reduce your inconsistencies and your discomfort. There's a couple of others that have come up in recent years that I've been reading about is that continued influence. So it's encoded into your memory because it keeps being repeated. And that even if it's not likely to be true, you still internalize it as it could be true. And then the saddest one that I don't like is that you just give up because the problem's too big and you don't have the problem to change it. So even though it's wrong, you can't engage. So what can we do? Well, one issue that has to go hand in hand with any initiatives to combat misinformation and disinformation is building trust and credibility. As a journalist, the trust in journalism, the trust in the news is like in the tank right now. It's the lowest it's ever been for a variety of factors that I don't need to get in, during this presentation. However, trust in who shares the information is a major factor. We've seen a big drop in the trust in media, in institutions in our society, in science. And so a lot of times the trust goes to who shares the information, and that often is greater than the actual root source of the information. So if your friends are sharing something, you're more likely to believe it because it came from your friend and you love your friends. So because you have that affinity for them, you're more likely to believe it. So how do we rebuild trust so that the public, so that people will, pay attention to what we have to offer? Reliable information. And one thing is to meet people where they are and speak their language. And so authenticity matters, and you have to become an active participant in the network that's there. So for those of you who are not under 30 and are not using TikTok, TikTok is a place to be. And so there are, so there's a hashtag you can see, Docs of TikTok. There's also Team Halo. Team Halo are the doctors and epidemiologists who have been putting together the COVID vaccine. So they are using this platform to counter misinformation, because as they went on it, they kept seeing the misinformation and disinformation being repeated. And they felt, I have to do something about this. And I have this knowledge and this expertise. So how can I use this platform to do it? So I have a couple of examples. I'll have you guys know I spent way too much time looking at TikToks to show you, but I picked out 3 from some interesting folks. So this is Dr. Katrine Wallace. She's a professor at the University of Illinois, and she's a doctor of epidemiology. And she likes to call out misinformers, and really motivated by filling a void of knowledge and expertise on TikTok.
Everyone that's getting this has had that.
It must be completely exhausting to constantly come up with new misinformation. This guy is saying that MPV, monkeypox, is coming from the COVID-19 vaccine. I would love to see the data that this person is looking at to make that determination, because I've never seen it presented that way by COVID-19 vaccination status. Also, the first cases of monkeypox were discovered in the 1970s in humans. So we definitely didn't have COVID-19 or the vaccine back then. We've given billions of doses of vaccine, and there's no evidence that it has any deleterious effects on the immune system. Monkeypox is very similar to smallpox, and we stopped vaccinating for smallpox in 1972 in the US, and we've had an increasingly susceptible population to monkeypox ever since. COVID and monkeypox are in different virus families, so stop spreading misinformation. Thank you.
So anyway, I wanted to show you that example. So you can see she has 272,000 followers, and she started on TikTok during the pandemic because she was motivated to try and use her expertise for good. So all of us, be a hero, use your expertise for good. Let's see if I can show you.
Everyone that's getting.
So here's another one. This is Dr. Tessa Commerce. She's a pediatrician in Seattle. So, and she also uses this platform to share information. Her main audience is adolescents. So she's answering the health questions that adolescents really want to know, because we know adolescents are on TikTok. So what she's doing there is just like something that I would do in a news story, but she's using, obviously, the platform of TikTok in a native way, the way that people use TikTok, to deliver some facts in such a way that people will take it in. So you think about a good teacher will use different ways to teach in order to get through to the audience. And so using TikTok this way is helping to get some information out there that may not have been there, and also to debunk stuff. So here's one. This is Dr. Jennifer Lincoln. She's an OBGYN in Chicago. She's very popular. You can see she has 2.8 million followers. Her tagline is the health class you wish you had in high school. And what I like about this particular one is that this is not a debunk of information. This is what we call a pre-bunk of information.
How do you spot bad medical advice on TikTok and other social media sites? Number 1, you'll have to use my product or you'll die. Guys, if they're selling you something, they're not objective. Number 2, No references. If they don't give you any references or they tell you to do your own research and look it up, run. Number 3, no credentials. Debbie from accounting is like really cool and really nice, I'm sure, but she doesn't have a degree and she doesn't have the credentials to be selling you your essential oils and telling you where to put them in your vagina or anything else like that. Number 4, sensationalism. If it sounds too good to be true or too terrible and we're all gonna die if we don't do this, yeah, then it probably isn't true. Facts matter. Show people who aren't following these guidelines that you're not going to put up for it and don't follow them or report them for medical misinformation because it matters. And guess what? You shouldn't just take my word for it too because I put stuff here. Check my references. Ask me. It's okay and it shows that you're smart.
So what Dr. Jennifer Lincoln just did in that one is something called pre-bunking, which I know someone in a,
How do you spot?
I think in one of the questions that submitted for this talk, submitted a question about pre-bunking. So what is pre-bunking? So you've heard of debunking. That's where bad information goes out there. You try to correct it. Pre-bunking is essentially not letting the misinformation seep through. And it's showing people examples of misinformation so that they can spot it and then question it and hopefully not take it in. And so, it's better to prevent misinformation from spreading at all than to debunk it once it's spread, because it's really hard to debunk it. And it's the same as, if we have doctors and medical health professionals on this webinar, preventing an illness is easier than trying to cure it. It's the same thing. So some examples of pre-bunking that are out there. One is you can do games. So there's this game that came up. It's called Go Viral, and it puts you in the shoes of a bad actor so that you can learn, the strategies that these bad actors use to try and trick people. If you don't want to be tricked, you don't want to be duped. Nobody likes that. So it can teach you how to do that. There's also a text message course that's offered by an organization called First Draft that texts you one lesson a day about how to avoid and prevent being infected with misinformation. And then also there are articles and social media posts like the one that we just saw where journalists and others are trying to give information to people so that then they aren't duped later. So here are 3 that just came out this week that I was able to find online, pre-bunking stories that were posted to help people navigate through the election that we just had this week. So you can see election days are rife with misinformation. Here's what to watch for. So that's the inoculation. That's the pre-bunking that may be actually effective. The other thing that I wanted to share is that I think if you combine pre-bunking, it's a form of news literacy. It's a form of information literacy. It's being able to spot a hoax and fact check stuff as it comes through. When you find something online, is that someone's opinion or is that fact? Is it news or is it advertising? Is it a rumor or is it propaganda? Is it bias or is it objective? Like as information consumers, this has been my mission as a journalist, is that I want people to be able to know the difference. Even my journalism students need to be able to spot the difference. When I seek out a source for a story, I'm looking for a good source, but I know that all my sources have a reason for talking to me because they want their perspective to be the one that comes across. So knowing what people's biases are, knowing what their angle is, and being aware of it helps you to counter it if needed or balance it out. So when people try to trick journalists, people try to trick the public, and we should be upset with that and want to fight back against it. Images are also very powerful nowadays in manipulating and persuading people. You think about videos, memes, all of those things often can spread even faster than a text story because people are looking at it and taking it in quickly. So here's the definition of news literacy, which I won't read to you, but this is from the News Literacy Project. I encourage all of you to go there. They have wonderful lessons that are available to learn about what are the things that journalists do when we're vetting information and deciding, good journalists, by the way, when we're vetting information and deciding whether to include something in a story. And this is what I teach my students here at UConn. Journalism students need to learn to be skeptical. Yes, you want to trust that people are telling the truth, even your friends and family, but a lot of times it's just not true. And when I approach a piece of information online, I try to approach it as being skeptical, like, it has to prove to be true to me. I'm going to assume it's false until it can prove to be true to me. Knowing that every voice can be heard, online information is not subject to censorship in most cases, and if you start from the content that it's untrustworthy, then you will go through the process of verifying it, of that verification. And so when it comes to facts, different path for each fact may be necessary. There can be multiple paths to the truth, but a good editor, when I was a newspaper reporter, my good editor always asked me, "How do you know that, Marie?" And if I didn't have a good answer, then I had to go back and do more reporting. I had to go do more research so I could prove it. And that's what we all should be doing. And also know that context is important. Know your own biases and know that of your sources. Don't make assumptions. Know one source stories or one source news diets. And attribution, is required on everything. If there's no attribution, where did that come from? Then how do you know it's true? There should be evidence there. These are some of the misinformation tips quickly to just, go through. This is what different journalism organizations encourage journalists to do when they see misinformation. One thing that is on here is that we have to pick our words carefully when we're trying to debunk misinformation, because what can end up happening is by reporting on the misinformation, you end up amplifying it anyway. So we have to think about sort of those techniques of, do I need to amplify it at all? Should I be silent about it? Or is there a way for me to write the story in such a way that I'm not leading with the misinformation, but leading with the correct information, mentioning the misinformation, and then going back and giving evidence for why that thing is incorrect and why this other part is correct? So, those are the kinds of things that journalists deal with. And you can see it's basically like, you got to be skeptical and you need to go slow. So to be a smarter news, an information consumer, you got to slow down. Don't be led by your emotions. Be careful if something you feel like is like super manipulating your emotions, that may be deliberate, and know that's a tactic that disinformation agents use. Follow the news. Look at more than one source. Don't outsource your judgment. I kind of like that idea where you're not just giving your judgment to someone else. Use your own good judgment, right? Don't outsource your judgment to your friends or to the technology or the algorithm. Search it for stuff on your own, and know that popularity, just because it comes up first in a Google search doesn't mean that it's reliable. All right. So practice good information hygiene. You got to scrub the information. Like, think about it. Like, dive in just a little bit deeper, and set an example before you share it. Don't share unless you know it to be true. And you really can, I hate when I see on Twitter where people put, retweets don't equal endorsements. Yes, it does. It does equal that. If you reshared it, then you want people to look at it. So be thoughtful about what do you amplify. And just so you know, these are all tips from the Center for News Literacy at Stony Brook University, which also has a great program if you wanted to look them up. I'm gonna skip that one. So the Surgeon General in August 2021, Vivek Murthy, he recommended applying warnings to social media information because it is such a public health problem nowadays. And before we take questions, I just wanted to show you quickly what are some of the actions that have been happening on the platforms to signal to people that maybe that information is not true. And so you can see Facebook started labeling COVID-19 vaccine posts with a link to official info. All right. Facebook also started a fact-checking network where they partnered with the Associated Press and the Washington Post and an international fact-checking network so that if someone tried to share a disputed article, they'd get reminded with a little pop-up notice saying that this content is in dispute. So that moment, that signal might actually stop someone from sharing it. All right. So the theory about misinformation warnings is that if it gives you a little notice, then you'll make a more informed decision about what to read. The research hasn't shown that these are necessarily effective. Contextual warnings that sort of show up underneath content, like you can see on this Facebook one, get vaccine info, you can sort of see that. That may not necessarily work because we're really good at just not looking at things. Like, well, I don't look at ads online and I don't look at little warnings because they're so tiny and down at the bottom. So what tends to work a little better, actually, and you can see here's another contextual warning. This is on Instagram where it actually pops up. Like, you can't see the image. It's saying it's false information. That is a bigger signal than putting a tiny little link at the bottom. Here's another one where it's saying this is a false information post. You can, join the fact sort of checking network for that. And then you could see why, even a link showing why do fact checkers think this thing is false. There's more things that have been done where I've seen this on, like it's called nudge technology, where you'll see a story or you want to link to something and it'll prompt you and say, are you sure you want to see this? Because this is a community that is highly offensive and, you know, is quarantined. So you're getting that warning first. And then this one over here from Twitter, you know, this link might actually be unsafe, that it's been identified as potentially spammy or unsafe, and do you want to keep going to it? You have the choice to keep going. We all have, you know, free speech in this country and free will. So you can continue, but at least it gives you that warning, and that interruption might helps you to think more for a second about whether or not you want to continue. Twitter has been taken over by Elon Musk, and we don't know what's going to happen on that platform. But they have had a system in place called Birdwatch, which is a way to fact check stuff that you're seeing on Twitter. And people can volunteer to be bird watchers and basically put notes on tweets that are suspect or untrue. Some of them are not, you know, if you want, it would be birdwatch.twitter.com is how you get there. Some of the Birdwatch contributions are shown to users. They're not shown to all users yet, so they're still testing it. But check it out, Birdwatch on Twitter, because you can see this is an example sort of with notes here on a health issue. So these are the notes suggesting context to be shown with this tweet. So this person tweeted this chart, and then they were talking about not an increase in stillbirths for people that have been vaccinated. So adding more context to the misinformation, that's, you know, that's sort of the key, is that you don't see something in a vacuum. You actually add more context to it. So I'll stop there. If people have questions, I want to make sure I leave time for that. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Yeah, so hi. Thank you so much for that. I am super interested in this topic. I'm actually doing a research on my own. Currently I'm a doctor of public health student at UC Berkeley. Would really love to talk to you more about this because I'm testing inoculation strategies to counter health misinformation, particularly in some countries in Southeast Asia where we share the same language. And yeah, so I'm thinking about, like, I mean, recently I was also told that inoculation is not going to work, and the main problem with health misinformation, is just misinformation in general, is in the tech itself. Like that is where the changes needs to be, and I was wondering, what are your perspective? What are your thoughts on this? Like, like, is it even still worth it for people like me to pursue inoculation as a strategy to counter misinformation?
I don't think it's not a good thing to study, because you might find out that breakthrough that really gets through the people. The thing that I was trying to get across I know I threw a lot of information at you today, is that there is not one solution, right? So inoculation combined with other things is only going to work. And I see actually another question from Mina Dufour in there that talks about, is it, the social media platforms themselves, like we're letting them be the arbiters of the content, right? Like we've handed them this power and they have it. And, how much more pressure can we also put on them? So yes, so now we have these signals that are coming up, right? Where you're getting, it's such a problem, especially in the United States, because we have free speech, and the First Amendment is very strong in this country. It's less so. Like if you look at policies in Europe, putting misinformation online has penalties, whereas in the U.S., you can lie, you can use hate speech, like you can get away with it, because we have this strong tradition and protection of free speech. So I would not discourage you from looking into more inoculation, because maybe there's a method that will work. When I get questions about news literacy, like there's no point in trying to teach an old dog new tricks. Every time I'm asked to speak to a senior citizen group, a library, the Center for Learning and Retirement here at UConn, I go and I talk to these people, because they are clearly interested in learning more and are willing to have an open conversation about it, which means they're willing to learn something new. And so I'm not going to close anybody off thinking that once you have been infected with misinformation, that we can't pull it out. And I think you just have, and I don't have time to get into like all the other techniques. I'd be happy, I can share my slides with with the Center for M Health, and if they want to share them with everybody. But there are other techniques that you can go about when just like a good teacher. If I am like attacking my students, they're not going to want to engage with me. But if I am a good listener, if they feel safe, if we build a rapport, if I let them contribute, then the likelihood of some information being passed along, right? The likelihood of them learning from me and internalizing the information and thinking twice about it might actually happen. When you yell at someone, when comments on social media, that was my area of expertise when I first came to UConn, and it was very upsetting. Like reading everyone's just attacking each other. Nobody has anything nice to say. Nobody listens. But that's not how we're going to fix this problem either. So I think there has to be more dialogue. In a country that protects free speech, our only weapon is more speech. So keep it coming. Everyone's got to get involved. I think there needs to be more people fighting for the good information and pushing down the bad information. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I know, Marie, that you can see the chat. So I think there's a few other questions in there. And yeah, we'll definitely go ahead and append those slides when we post the recording to this. So it should be on the website by tomorrow.
Okay, here I see a question from Alan. He asked, can you comment on the use of myths and facts campaigns? He does some works with PSA, public health campaigns. There was a study showing that myths and facts campaigns can backfire and increase stigma toward mental health. So one thing that I was reading about how to approach, how to approach information, like effective messaging, is just like when I talked about when I do as a journalist, if I debunk something and the headline basically says the misinformation again, that's really bad. Because all I did, because some people just read headlines, and now I'm just spreading the bad information again. That when it comes to myths and facts, start with the fact. Like put the fact first, then you could talk about what the myth is, and then go back to the fact. They say that there's been some studies showing that is a more effective way of approaching the information and doing it in such a way that you're not, we obviously don't want to stigmatize anyone, about their concerns, but we don't want misinformation to be the main thing. So that sort of way of compiling things is good. The other thing that can be really effective in, let me see if I can find it. The other thing that's effective in terms of messaging, and again, the bad actors use this and we can use it too, is you want to tell a story. You want it to have a strong narrative around it. Like the most effective news stories have some sort of human element to them, because I'm a human, you're a human, and I can relate to another human being. I can't relate to facts and figures necessarily. I'm not going to feel anything that way. But if it has a powerful visual component and it has a strong narrative and it's repeated, the important information, the fact is repeated, that is more effective, right, than not. And you think about the disinformation purveyors use the same tactics. They want to provoke your emotions. It has a strong visual component and it's got some sort of narrative connected to it that makes you feel fear, anger, or whatever that thing is. So we can use those same tactics when we want to have more effective messaging as well. And know that changing people's minds isn't easy, but we have to figure out what are those ways to design messages that will break through, because there's just so many messages, there's so much noise, there's so much bad stuff out there. And I think the more of us who are on, who are the heroes on the good side, who want good information, that will, if there's more of us, then that'll be more information on that side. So. I appreciate everyone's putting these great links in the chat too. So if you I can compile those at the end of my talk as well, and make those available to everyone.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Yes, I'm speaking from Nigeria.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you for this wonderful presentation. I would like you to talk more about malinformation, because I had the concept many times. Apart from disinformation, misinformation, there's also malinformation. So, and I want to know about the relationship between misinformation and pseudoscience.
And pseudoscience. Well, I think that's a good, malinformation would certainly be that, where they take some sort of like some little nugget of what is actually fact, right? Or, a scientific thing that's been proven, but then they twist it into something else. I mean, that really is malinformation. And the malinformation, which is based upon what is fact or seems like fact. I mean, you see that a lot, even when I was looking at the TikTok videos yesterday, when I was preparing this presentation, where, the TikToker will find some scientific study that's been published, take, one line out of it, focus in on that, and then extrapolate all this other stuff out of context, for not making sense. That is definitely what contributes to that pseudoscience. And what's the problem with malinformation is that some people will believe it because, oh, there is this nugget of truth inside of there, but it's out of context, so that makes it no longer true. And again, it's one of those things like in news literacy to teach people about seeing that. I mean, most often, I'll see it in journalists fall prey to it as well, where I don't read the whole academic, I don't read the whole scientific study, or I don't check with experts in the field. And, you make an assumption based upon what you're seeing, and then you are then spreading something that's not necessarily true. I think that we have to make expertise important again and desired. And definitely as a journalist, like, I want to go to an expert because I don't know everything, and talking to many of them will help me to know more. So yes, I think that I can try and find some more resources dealing with malinformation. But yeah, pseudoscience is totally built on that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you, Prof.
So, Marie, where can people find you if they want to continue this conversation or have other questions?
Well, you can find me on Twitter. My handle is @MarieKShan. And you can also find me you can find me on UConn Journalism's website, journalism.uconn.edu. You can find me there as well. But please, if you have questions or you want to reach out or talk more, I recognize this as a serious problem, and I'm so glad there's so many of you here who also see it as a problem. And, if all of us work together, then we can make a dent in it, because we have to. I mean, I don't know what other choice we have when it comes to, health information, but also just all other kinds of information that's out there. So thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah. And thank you again for that wonderful presentation, and everyone else for coming as well. So really wonderful having you here.